So in this video we're going to talk a little bit about how to work out percentages. What I'm going to do is just show you the very basics of doing percentages. I'm not going to do any advanced questions, but probably I follow this video up with a series of junior cert questions. Okay, so let's look at the most basic example. You're asked to get 30% of 2000. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do this. I'm just going to recommend a few. If your teacher does it a different way, don't worry about that. All of these methods are perfectly valid. You can pick whichever one suits you. Now, the first thing you got to realize is that the word of can be represented by the multiply sign. So when you say 30% of 2000, that's really 30% multiplied by 2000. The first thing I would do before I work something out in a maths problem is kind of in my head just roughly figure out what the answer should roughly be. So 30% of 2000, well, that's 30% is close to 33%, which I know is 1/3. So roughly the answer is going to be 1/3 of 2000, which is roughly 600 and something, right? 600 and something. So I know roughly that's what the answer is going to be. So I can just check with that at the end, see if my answer was close to that. So the first method I could use here, I've noticed that 30% is quite an easy one because that's 3 times 10%. So if I found 10% of 2000, that would be 200. Then multiply by 3, I would get 600. So this happens to be an easy one. I can work that out quickly in my head. Another way of doing it is simply keying it into the calculator. So 30% of 2000, that's 30% multiplied by 2000. So if you have a Casio calculator, you could key it in like this. So the type on the 3, the 0, then the shift key, followed by the percentage key, multiply key, and then the 2000. If you try that, you will get the answer of 600. Now, some of you may not be able to find the percentage key. Well, actually, it's not really the percentage key. It looks more like this, the left-hand bracket, but above the left-hand bracket, you will see the percentage sign in orange. So look for that in your calculator, and remember to press the shift before you press the left-hand bracket. Okay, so that was a fairly easy problem, but let's say we have a more difficult percentage, like this example here, 87% of 2000. So for that, you couldn't really work it out in your head like you did with the previous one. You'd have to key that into your calculator. So again, you do the same thing. You press 87 in here and do the same routine here, and you will get the answer for that. So in this problem, we're told that 30% of students in a class follow Liverpool. If 9 students follow Liverpool, how many students are in the class altogether? Right. So we know that 30% of the students follow Liverpool. That amounts to 9 students. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways of working this out. First of all, I'm going to do it using an equation. I'm going to say 30% equals 9 students. Right, so 30% equals 9 students. What I want to find is how many students altogether. Now, how many altogether would be 100%? So I need to go from 30% to 100%. So what I could do is I could go down to 10% by dividing by 3. So 3 into 9 goes 3. So we know that 10% is the equivalent of 3 students, and to get what 100% is, we need to multiply by 10. So it'd be 100% would be the equivalent of 30 students. So that's one way of doing it. Usually what I do is I make an equation and I put the percentage equal to the actual amount. Then I try to get down to a number that's divisible into 100, right? So in this case, I went down to 10% by dividing both sides by 3. Why did I choose 10%? Well, 10% goes nice and evenly into 100. So all I have to do now is multiply the 10 by 10 to get 100%. And then, of course, I have to do the same here and multiply the 3 by 10 to get 30. Now, another way of approaching this problem is if we let the total number of students equal to a variable s. So we know that 30% of students, so in other words 30% multiplied by s, 30% multiplied by s, has to give you 9 students. So 30% of the students, the total number of students, gives you 9 students. So we can make that equation, and then of course we can use the laws of equations to solve this. So we can leave the variable on its own here and bring the 30% across. Now the 30% on the left hand side, it was multiplying by s. So when you bring it across, you have to do the opposite of multiplying, which is divide. So you're going to be left with 9 over 30%. 9 over 30%, you can key that into your calculator. Instead of using the multiply sign, now you're going to be using the divide sign, but you still key it into the calculator the same way. When you put keying in the 30, you put in the 30 followed by shift and then the percentage key. And you end up with an answer of 30 students. Okay, so there are 2 different methods. Pick whichever one you feel most comfortable with, and let's move on to the next problem. So let's have a look at another one. The cost of a product is 128 euros. If it sells at a profit of 20%, what is its selling price? Okay, so first thing I do with this question is I underline key data. So the cost of the product is 128 and the profit is 20%. And what we want to do is find the selling price. Now, you have to realize that the selling price is really the cost price plus the profit. So one way of solving this would be to get the profit of 20%, so that'd be 20% of 128, and then add the answer that you get onto the cost price, which is 128. So I find that's the way most students will do this problem, but there's a kind of a neater way of doing this, and you might want to try it this way, just to save yourself a little bit of time. So to use this method, you have to realize that the cost of 128 is really 100%. And then if you add on 20% to that 100%, you get the selling price, which is 120% of the cost price. So it's 120% of the cost price. So again, of is the multiply sign. So we're going to multiply 128 times 120%, put that in our calculator, and we get an answer of 153.6. Alternatively, we could multiply 128 by 1.2, making that into a decimal by dividing by 100. Both methods will give you the same answer of 153.6, which is our selling price. So in this question, we're told that the selling price of a product after 12% discount is 176 euros. Find the selling price before the discount was made. So we've a discount, and after the discount, the value of the product is 176 euros. The discount was 12%. So again, many ways of doing this. I'm going to show you 2 ways. So the first method is we're going to figure out what percentage is 176 euros worth. Well, if it's a 12% discount, that means you're taking 12% from 100%. That's going to give you 88%. So 88% is the equivalent of 176 euros. Now the original price of the product would be the equivalent of 100%, of course. So really what we want to do is find out what 100% is worth in euros. So we know what 88% is worth. It's worth 176. So we need to go down from, first of all, go down from 88% to maybe 1%. And then from 1% we can go up to 100%. So let's divide both sides by 88 to get this down to 1%. Dividing both sides by 88, we get 1% on the left hand side and €2 on the right hand side. So 1% is the equivalent of €2. To get what 100% is, we need to multiply both sides by 100. So therefore we can say that the original price of the product was €200. Okay, so let's have a look at the second way we can do this. And we could after all say that 80% of the original price has to be equal to 176. So if we let the variable x stand for the original price, 88% of that gives us 176. So the 88%, which is here multiplying by x, if we bring that across to equal to sign, we do the opposite. That means we divide 88%, not 88 now, 88% into 176. So if you key this into your calculator, you're going to end up with the same answer as we got before. The final amount is equal to 200. So we write 200 down here, right? So 200 is your original amount. And again, I just reiterate that here it's very important to put in the percent sign here. It's not going to work if you just put 176 divided by 88, because that's just going to give you an answer of 2. So you have to divide by 88%. Now you could, if you want, change the 88% into a decimal by dividing by 100, and in that way you would get 0.88. So here you would be dividing by 0.88, still get the same answer of 200. So in this question we're told that the price of a product decreases from 120 to 117. Find the percentage decrease in price. So I often find that students get a bit confused by these kind of questions, and what I always suggest to them is to kind of break down this phrase here, percentage decrease. What I mean by that is you want to ignore the percentage part first of all and just find out what the decrease in the price is. So that's pretty easy. It's 120 take away 117. So once we've done that, we have to change this this amount 3 into a percentage. So most people realize that you have to kind of make it into a fraction first and then multiply by 100, but they sometimes get confused by what the fraction should be. So on top we should have the 3, and on the bottom in this case we would have 120. Now why do we pick 120? Because ask yourself the question, which of these two values has decreased? Has the 120 decreased or has the 117 decreased? So you would say the 120 has decreased to 117. So the percentage is based on what has decreased. The 120 has decreased. So you want to make it into a fraction first, put the decrease over the original amount, 120, and then multiply by 100. So you make it into a fraction, multiply by 100, and that will give you the percentage answer. So just to repeat again, the amount decreases from 120 to 117. So it's really the from amount that you put here below. So it's the decrease 3 over the original amount 120. That's what's being decreased. So you want to get the 3 as a percentage of 120. And you do that by making a fraction, multiplying by 100. You get an answer of 2.5%. Now, sometimes I find that students find working out the higher tax a little bit difficult. So here's a quick explanation. In this example, we're told that the gross income is 50,000. Standard rate cutoff point is 32,000. Calculate the higher tax at a rate of 40%. Right, so usually in a question like this, we're not given it here, but there's usually standard rate of tax and higher rate of tax. So the standard rate of tax, you would work that out by, in this case, for example, you would, whatever that, let's presume it's 20%, right? So if the standard rate of tax you would work that out by multiplying it by the standard rate cutoff point, in this case, which is 32,000. So what does that mean? The standard rate cutoff point, that's kind of a limit. So if you earn more than that amount, then you would have to pay just 20% on the first 32,000 that you earn. So anything that you earn more than that, you're going to have to pay at a higher rate, the 40% rate. But you definitely have to pay your 20% on this amount. So if you were working that out, you would multiply 20% by 32,000 and you get your answer here, right? Now in this question we don't really we don't have to worry about that. All I want you to be aware of is that you've already paid your standard rate tax on this amount. So all you have to do now is pay tax on the remainder. So the remainder means the difference between this 32,000 and 50,000, which would be 18,000. So you haven't paid any tax on that yet, so what you have to do is multiply the 40%, the higher tax, by 18,000. And that'll give you 7,200. So in order to work out the higher tax, it's important to realize it's not 40% of the whole amount, the 50,000. It's only 40% of the remainder after you've paid your standard rate tax. So you paid your standard rate tax on this 32,000. So you can think of that, that's taken care of. You've already paid the tax on that. And all you need to do now is pay the higher tax on the remainder between 32,000 and 50,000, which is 18,000. 40% of that would give you 7,200. Sometimes in Cert you get asked percentage questions. For example, this question here: find the percentage of people who liked one fruit only. So this is a Venn diagram. It's to do with the people who like apples, oranges and pears. And the question is, find the percentage of people who like one fruit only. So the key to doing these is to identify the area of the diagram you're talking about first. So the people who liked one fruit only would have to be these guys, these 4 people who liked apples only, and the 5 people who liked oranges only, and the 2 people who liked pears only. So that's the area we're talking about. So we'll have to add those up. So 2 plus 5 is 7, plus 4 is 11. So you'd have 11 over 100 if you want to make that into a fraction. 11 out of 100 like only one fruit only, and then to make it into percentage we multiply by 100, and that will give you 11%. So the next question, find the percentage of people who like at least 2 fruits. That's a little bit more subtle, that question, right? So the people who like at least 2 fruits, so you might think it's just these guys, the 11, the 5 and 30, but actually the 40, even though they like 3 fruits, they at least like 2 fruits. That would be true. So we would have to include all of these, because we could say the statement that they like at least 2 fruits is true for all of these. So this is the area we're concerned with, and again we add all the amounts. So 30 and 40 is 70, 81 plus 5 is 86. So that'll give us 86 over 100, multiply by 100, give you 86%. Now there are all sorts of variations of this type of question that you can get. For example, you could be asked what percentage of people like apples or oranges? And when you hear the word "or," you should think union. So that's really the union of the set of apples and the set of oranges. The union would be, if you were to shade it in, you'd have to shade in all of this. So we need to add all the numbers within those 2 sets to answer that one and get the correct percentage. What if the question was find the percentage of people who liked apples or oranges but not pears? So if that were the case, they're saying apples or oranges, well that's what we've shaded in here, but then not pears, so we're not allowed to have pears, so we kind of have to shade out the pears part. So what we're left with then is the 4, the 30 and 5. So all of these we have to take out of it. And to answer that, we'd have to add the 4, the 30 and the 5 to get 39%. So you really have to think about those kind of questions and make sure you have the right area before you go ahead and try and work out the percentage. So here's another kind of percentage question you might get. The general type of question that we're talking about here is when you're asked to get the percentage of a particular part of a given shape. So for example, in this question here, we're told to find the percentage of the rectangle that is shaded red. So what percentage of the total rectangle is shaded red? Now to do that, what you have to realize, you can't really, well you can do it directly, but it's a kind of an awkward way of doing it. The easier way to do this is kind of to do it indirectly by taking the area of the triangle here from the area of the whole rectangle, and that's going to give you the shaded area. So we start by working out the area of the rectangle, and of course that's the length by the width, so it'll be 8 times 4, or 4 times 8, which gives you 32. So we know the total area of this is 32. And then to get the area of the triangle, we have to use our formula, half the base by the height. Now really I should have written in the formula here. I normally, when I'm doing things like this, I would write down the formula before I'd work it out. So half the base, which is 3, times the height equals 4.5. Now to get the shaded area, what we'd have to do is subtract the area of the triangle from the area of the total rectangle. So that will be 32 minus 4.5, which gives us an answer of 27.5 as being the area of the shaded region. Now, of course, the question asks us to get the percentage of the rectangle that is shaded red. So to make this into a percentage, we've got to make it into a fraction first. So we put the 27.5 over the total area of the rectangle. And then we multiply by 100 to get the percentage. So again, remember that we're trying to get the red shaded region as a percentage of the whole rectangle. So we're getting it as a percentage of the whole rectangle. That means we're going to have to put the area of the whole rectangle underneath the 27.5. This lets us know what fraction of the whole rectangle is shaded red. And then if we multiply by 100, we get the percentage of the whole rectangle that is shaded red.